Hey everybody, sorry it's been a while since I've made a YouTube video. Um, I've been really happy with the results of them. Lots of people, well, relative to my, I guess, notoriety, I feel like a lot of people have watched them, and I've got a lot of new followers since I've made one. So I really appreciate that. Thanks for watching them and sharing them and talking about them, and especially for asking questions of possible next videos. I wanted to address one that I got about characters, character design. It was actually through Instagram. And so I wanted to address that. I don't know exactly what to call myself. I mean, I'm an illustrator. I'm an artist. I don't like make a ton of money from character design specifically. Like, I don't work at a studio, but I realize that characters are obviously very important. Likable, relatable, visually interesting characters should really drive stories. So with any project I come to, I try to put a high level of design thinking into the characters that I'm creating. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Characters are, what are they? They're people. Maybe they're skeletons, or maybe they're weird sort of bear angel type creatures. Maybe they're Batman. He's a symbol. But what are they? Characters are beings. They have thought. They should have desires. They should have relatable qualities to everyone. And so we're talking about very universals when we're kind of thinking about characters as a whole. I love to read comic stories and see movies that have characters with actual desires that fit for the character. So there's save the world type of stories, and those are great in their place. But I sometimes am moved more not by the hero who just wants to save the world because that's the right thing to do, that's the good thing to do, but a protagonist who loves, let's say, I'll just pull in this recent inspiration, this comic, Helena Crash. It's an awesome comic written by Fabian Rangel Jr. And the art is by Warwick Johnson Cadwell. And I'll talk a little bit more about him as an artist later, but specifically these characters really work for me because this is a woman protagonist, and she is interested in coffee. She loves coffee. She has to procure it because it's illegal in the future, in this future. And she also likes collecting things, which is, very relatable things. I mean, we all like to, a lot of us like to collect things or go antiquing or something, and that's a part of this story and this narrative. And there's fantastical elements, I mean, it's a whole world, but the characters are real. There are real relationships. There's real desires. She is working to save up for something, and I'm not exactly sure what, but that is very intriguing. I don't know what because I haven't gotten the 4th issue, but that's beside the point. She's a character that has depth, and it's an implied depth. I don't know everything about her, and I think that's very important to not reveal everything about a character. There is depth, there is mystery. So how does that come into play when we're designing a certain character, when we're just focusing on rendering it, drawing it. I think it should come into play when we're thinking about what they're wearing. You know, is the character, who is the character? Does he have desires? This is a businessy type person, kind of a little bit of a secret agent type feel, but he's wearing a power suit. Like, this thing is, you know, it's meant to maybe intimidate, maybe, you know, cause him to have authority when he walks into a room. These are real characters, and they should have real desires. This kid is rebellious in this story idea that I'm coming up with. He's rebellious. He may have a chip on his shoulder. And while things you don't want to be cliche, there are cliches that obviously work with characters, and they're very visual cues to say this person is playing in the role of this character. So while visually you can play with these things, the character should have depth of character. So that's a lot. That's kind of like really thinky, but I think it's, you know, obviously very important when you're just drawing a character, because you can draw something, you know, from pieces that you see other people doing. You can draw things from characters that you see on Instagram or Pinterest, and that's not wrong. But to come to a character thinking about the reality of the character and their desires, I think is a very good place to start. So I'm going to talk about another approach is kind of the same, this character that I'm working on now, just for purely a visual thing. This is going to sound very contrary, but I don't have a story or a backstory for this character other than a very emotional visual aspect. So inspiration comes in a lot of forms. Yesterday, my wife and I were talking about rompers for men. If you don't know, that's a thing. So you might want to check that out. But you know, we think about it, and we come up with this reality that there are rompers for men, and it's bizarre and it's weird. And when I first, you know, heard that, I thought it was weird. Probably still do, but regardless of that, so the day went along. We went out for a run. I was listening to Roisin Murphy. I don't know how well known she is, but she's got fantastic vocals and lyrics, and a very cool music. And I listened to one of her songs called Primitive, and it's talking about kind of animals, you know, people as animals. And later on, we were driving around, and we saw this biker who looked interesting. I mean, he had like K-Swiss shoes on with like tall white socks, and then like was riding this like Harley, and smoking, and like looked really cool. But then there's also this like dad vibe that he was giving off. So, and then, you know, there's a beautiful sunset, you know, dusk and the moon. So all of that kind of came into this character of this kind of romper wearing tiger persona of this character. And I just wanted to do that illustration. It's kind of I suppose an abstract character, though there's very literal representations of it, if that makes sense. So that's where my inspiration for some characters comes from, and that's obviously not wrong either. Inspiration, I think, is, you know, it's cliche that it comes from everywhere, but it does, and it should, I think, come from specifically your daily life, what you're thinking about, not in the context of your home or even your workplace, but things that you're thinking about. Are you engaged in interesting ideas or finding out interesting ways of doing things, interesting vocations, people, places? What do they mean to you? The real you, not the online you, where you're just searching for things that look cool, if that makes sense. And I do this all the time, so I'm not like shaming anyone for just scrolling on Instagram or scrolling on Pinterest and looking for something visually interesting to apply to my work. But I think that you'll really get gains by this internal kind of searching of your daily life. So that's probably long in the tooth explanation, and I hope that means something. But yeah, this is sort of the backstory of characters that I'm thinking about and I'm infusing into my work when I create a character. So I will bring you over to my computer and we'll talk about characters a little bit more, or possibly something else. Anyway, I'm cutting now. Okay, so this is what I had on my sketch on the table, and thinking about all the things that I said, I was processing that as I was drawing it at the time, and not being satisfied with the backstory of the character. I've seen and I've done a lot of characters that are just characters without a scene, without a context, without a setting that they're in. And sometimes those do the trick just fine, and give a certain level of backstory just in the character. But because I didn't come up with a sort of a persona or a reason for this character existing, I felt like I really wanted to put him in a context. I felt like he and his motorcycle were lacking, and so there's a point when, as artists and designers and illustrators, we think, what is the X factor? What is different about this than any and every other visually interesting character online? You're competing with the best out there when you're doing art. You are looking to add something to the world of art and design and illustration that isn't purely just visually interesting. It's kind of an interesting concept, but you're trying to say something. So what is something that you're bringing to the world, as far as a character? How is this character different is the basic point. Sorry, I'm very long-winded, so I will try to do better, but that's just how it goes. So I wanted to put him in a context, and so I drew a background, kind of inspired by last night, dusk, seeing a motorcyclist. But the surrounding is a part of the character, if you understand what I mean. There is a context to the character that's saying something about him. There's a desert. There's kind of like this bar type seedy smoke store probably he's next to in this sort of crummy parking lot, a disused place on the edge of the wilderness in the West, and so there's story applied to him through the world that he exists in. There's a reason that we don't know. He's in the corner, in the dark. He's existing in a world because he is choosing to be in that certain context. So that's that's a lot about character. I don't know if that's answering specifically what people want to hear about characters or character design, but that's the best I got. That's kind of where I'm coming from, and hopefully that probably like inspires more questions than answers, which I think is maybe good to ask yourself questions of why are you doing this, why are you creating this character, why am I doing this, why is someone else doing this. Always be asking. I'll talk segue into a little bit about rendering and my process, a little bit more of like how to draw, how I draw, what specifically I'm thinking about as far as style when this in this character and this scene is the topic. So a lot of you know I'm kind of playing around with a lot of things. I'm not a super advanced illustrator as far as my career. So I'm dabbling in illustration. I'm dabbling more in comics now. There's a visual storytelling, and there's just so much meat that comics bring to the table. And I'm super engaged in it, in storytelling and also characters. In the visual medium of comics and storytelling as a printed object, not as a segue into movies or animation or something like that, but specifically comics. So I want to talk about legibility in comics, but I'll talk a little bit about style. Well, this is the same thing. Okay, so legibility. Where do I begin? So when I'm talking about legibility, let me do something real quick. Okay. Legibility, when talking about that term, that definition, we think about readability. We think about writing, handwriting, text. So I will demonstrate what I mean through that using the font Helvetica. So the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Okay, Helvetica. Incredibly clear sans serif type that's highly legible. This is a type that's used for signs a lot of times, direction, airports, train stations. You can just look at this and read it pretty quickly, about as quick as you can read anything else. And so it's used in a lot of things like that. For books, they'll use a lot of, not necessarily sans serif, but serif types like I'm not a designer, but let me see. Times New Roman. So I'm not going to say that this is the best readable book font, but it's definitely more book-like than Helvetica. So it's still readable, and in a book context, the letters aren't the object. The image that you see is not the object that the writer wants you to get. It's the concept, it's the idea, it's the story, the narrative of the characters, of the world, and it's the story. The story is the main character. And so they're not using this font. Let's see. I don't even know the name of this font, but a very scripty. Let's see. Okay, brush script. Okay, so this is a font the designer would not use unless he or she is calling attention to the font, to the typeface, to the letters themselves. It's a very vocal font. It's calling a lot of attention to itself. And that is a distraction to the reader. If you wouldn't see a prose novel in this typeface because it's distracting as hell, and it calls attention to itself and not the story, not the narrative. So that's what I mean about legibility. So very legible, simple, readable, non-distracting, non-fatiguing when you read this. Whereas you have this, where some people might say, "This is beautiful. Look at the curls and all this." And as a letter form, it's possibly a little bit more interesting. And this is not the best example because I'm not sure that there's much good that can be said from this. But like a hand letter type, let's take that. Let's take a very beautiful hand letter type. That is an interest piece in itself, and it's not primarily used for legibility. So that's in a word context. I want to bring that to a comic context because comics are books. They're readable, they're narrative. So visually, they are language. How you draw, how you color especially, and light your image is similar to a font and a typeface. And it's something that I've had to really work out and kind of figure out. So an example of that from my own site is, let's take, it's not here yet. So let's take this little Hellboy comic that I made and look at it. So I'm an illustrator. I'm coming from a very illustrative background where I render a lot in Paint. For example, some of these other ones where I'm painting a lot. I'm focusing on one image, so I can put a lot into it, and it doesn't feel like I'm spending too much time on one image because I want this one image to do a lot of work as far as engaging and telling a story. So I'm spending a lot of time on one image. Transfer that over to comics, and it works. By the end of this, though, by the end of doing this comic, this 9-page comic, where it's highly rendered by Paint, it was incredibly fatiguing. And I was like, whatever I do next, it's going to have flat colors and be a little simpler. Because there's a point where rendering something to make it look beautiful and interesting takes away from the goal of the comic. And I think this comic worked well. I'm not saying this is a failed attempt. But how to improve and how to tell stories better, in my opinion. My goals are to have a very readable comic that is visually interesting, yes, but it's not a bear to execute. So execution, especially in comics, is super important. Comic artists are functioning at a very fast pace, and to slow yourself down in a coloring context, especially if you're coloring yourself. And I know that there are colorists that spend as much time, or if not more, on coloring it than illustrator, than the person drawing or inking it. But specifically doing it both for my comic is what I'm talking about. I needed a faster process. I needed a more legible visual language. So hopefully that all makes sense. I will kind of show you the example. So this is my example of kind of a very highly rendered thing done by myself. And at the end of it, I wanted to never color anything again because it was just so time consuming to make every panel like an illustration or to the level of illustration that I was accustomed to. And here at the end, this is the last page, I'm really cutting out, I'm really like simplifying, this very flat backgrounds when I don't need them. So you can kind of tell that I was like ready to be done. Okay, so very legible comics and comic artists that I personally am really enjoying is a lot of European comics. And this is happening in America too, but I just wanted to highlight a few of my favorites. Christophe Blain. These are kind of low-res images. But Christophe Blain, I don't know much about him, but shoot, I love his comics. Like, his images are visual language in simplicity, but also interest. And it's something I want to emulate because as a creator, it needs to be faster for me. I can't spend tons of hours like rendering the hell out of every panel. That just takes the life out of it. And something that Christophe is really got a corner on the market is making everything feel very alive, and it's not fatigued. I can tell that he's doing these faster probably than what I was doing. And there's so much life in the character, in the lines. It's almost like at a point you're like, he doesn't even care. Like he's not even like rendering those rocks. Like that doesn't even look like rocks or an engine. I mean, did he not look at reference or anything like that? And that kind of mindset is dangerous when you're thinking about comics, because these are getting the job done, and the comic story is the piece of artwork. It's not the mountains in the background. It's the movement of the characters. It's the readability of your reader that enjoys just reading this and is not caught up with how well he draws hands, or how well how realistic, I should say, is this guy's nose, or how interesting is this guy's nose. It's fast, it's clear, and especially the colors, they're flat, and that is something I really appreciate in this comic. So he's an example, really good one for readability. I will go to Warwick Johnson Cadwell, which I mentioned the art in his comic Helena Crash before, and he's doing the same thing. He's using lines that are not they're not super rendered. They're quick, and they're possibly a little bit ugly to some people who are accustomed to American comics of superheroes where everything is rendered. Anatomy is stressed to the T, almost to a fault. And he's concerned with anatomy, but he's concerned with the interest and the readability of the character, of each character, of the settings, and not catching the reader up on the realism, but the fastness, the fast-paced design is closer to the simplicity of Helvetica and Times New Roman than scripty font, in my opinion. Maybe someone else is gonna be like, this is so distracting. His style is super distracting. But the emphasis I suppose I'm putting is a lot of the colors and a lot of the colors and tones are not overproduced. The lines are the lines, and but the colors are not very distracting to me, and they're very readable. So another example is Loic Locatelli, and I probably pronounced that wrong, but I believe he's a French guy, and he is producing really beautiful work, and his colors are all flat. The lines are there. They are not. He's concerned with the story and the aspect of the character, and not necessarily getting the anatomy right. Getting hung up on anatomy or reference is not his thing, but it is providing visual interest at a fast pace. So when he's rendering this, it's all looks like the lines are all in one image, one layer. They're just pencil lines, looks like here, and the color is flat. So I don't want to belabor that point, but I would say that that's a very readable, comic style, especially this one. Okay, so this is Pocahontas. This is a book that he did, and it's black and white plus a spot color of yellow. And I'm just like, wow, this is really moving me along when I read it, because it is simple. It's not rendered out, and there's a lot of life to the images in each panel, without spending an incredible amount of time focusing on perspective or realism. So don't want to belabor that, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about legibility. So I want to emulate that in myself, in my own comics. So I want to take kind of the storytelling aspect, which I think I did do well with this Hellboy comic, and I want to simplify it. I need to streamline my process, especially if I'm going to be doing this for other people, and producing at a high rate of a comic a month, a floppy comic a month. So I've got to simplify and do this faster, and I would love to make it a little bit quicker to read. So when I'm coming to this illustration, I'm going to come to it thinking more about that than about how do I make this the prettiest image that I can possibly make, with all of the atmospheric perspective and everything else. I'm going to come to this in a quick style. So this is my sketch. I printed it out. I'm going to trace over it quickly, and not be too concerned about making everything just perfect. So let's go to the drawing table, and I appreciate you sticking with me. I know that's a lot of talk, but hopefully you're enjoying it. I know there are probably some. Okay, here we are back at my drawing table, where I'm going to be finally doing the line work on this character. And comic panel, though it's just one illustration, I'm coming at it with the perspective that this is a comic style, for me to make something readable and legible. So I'm coming from a place where a few years ago, or even closer than that, but whatever, a while ago I was doing these type of things. I was doing paintings, character-based, paintings that were highly rendered, highly produced. And while I like them, I've moved on to being interested in telling stories in the comic medium. So that's, and like, this is what I started my YouTube channel on, tutorials for painting in gouache and Prismacolor, and those are very interesting. Those are, I think, really great processes, but my goal here, my goal currently, is to tell a visual comic story as fast as I can. So here we are, and I can't look back, So I hope that makes sense. Now, coming to this, I am working in a style that I've done previously before, where I'm just drawing on marker paper. This is Canson marker Pro Layout marker paper, and it's super nice. So my whole idea coming in this fashion is coming with speed. So a lot of people draw on Bristol and they use a light table. I don't have a light table, and it feels to me a little more unnatural to have a light backlighting my lines. And so I just bought marker paper and tried it out, and it's transparent. I think you can see the lines underneath, and I can. So I'm going to be drawing pencil lines on this clean sheet of marker paper over the printed sketch lines. And I think it's a wonderful process. My pages, my comic pages, are not like this sexy kind of ink lines and real thick, and like have a lot of like underdrawing and white out, and it's not, cool in that sense. But I believe that that's a pitfall when I'm coming to visual storytelling in the comic medium, and I'm thinking, how cool can I make this image? For me, I don't want to do that. I want to execute something quickly. I want to tell an interesting story, and I want the visuals to be interesting and readable, legible. So even in the minutia of my insanity, I am not drawing this image with my normal Blackwing pencil, because I really kind of put a lot of thought into turning my pencil just so, and making this line a little thicker, and sharpening it, and letting it go blunt, and everything, and that whole it sounds, this is super insider baseball type stuff, but that takes up mental energy for me. That takes up thought to think about, I've drawn this line, now my pencil is a little thicker, because wood pencils, they wear down, and they're not a fixed point. Mechanical pencils, on the other hand, are. And I've got a 2B lead in this one to make it darker. And this will, I think, allow me to think less about the lines that I'm putting down, and just kind of let it have life. Has anyone watched Bob Ross? I used to love Bob Ross, and I have no shame in that. Where am I going with this? Oh, Bob Ross, you've destroyed my train of thought. Who knows? I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry. I'm just going to draw this thing. And here we go. So I'm just going to go for it. I'm not even going to think about little aspects. I've got my underlined drawing down, and I I'm going to talk because normally, traditionally, I couldn't talk because I was thinking so much about the lines, thinking so much about where to put everything, not put everything, but how to make my lines. And I'm going to try to talk this time because there's a kind of a serendipity kind of thing when you're a little bit distracted, I feel like, and you're also rendering and drawing, where stuff just surprises you. And I guess that's the Bob Ross thing that I was thinking of, where he was almost like surprised at what was unfolding before him on his canvas, because he wasn't super planning. And there's life in that, I think, coming at something in that way. So drawing some bricks. Am I thinking about scale for bricks? You know, sometimes I think about that. I get caught up with the idea of, these bricks are like huge. Like they're just, you know, no mason would make a brick that is like, you know, these aren't standard sized bricks. You know, who is the mason in this town, and why are they making these large bricks? They're just unwieldy, and how would that work? No, I put texture down. I put lines down. It's brick. You can tell it's brick. I can tell it's brick. I'm going to do a store sign. And it's like one of those neon signs. I'm not looking at reference. I know what a neon sign kind of consists of, and so do a lot of other people. And they can tell this is a neon sign. And the color will help a little bit, but I'm just kind of free form right now. It's kind of scaring me, honestly. I don't know what I'm drawing on the sign. Some sort of smoke type motif. But we're going to just play around and do it, because I want to see kind of where my distracted mind, how that will create things that I wasn't intending to create. So here we go. Whatever that is. Open. Gotta let people know. Gotta let people know when you're open. These are things I'm pulling from my mind by just, you know, viewing everyday life. And, you know, if I've seen a neon sign, I know that there's a lit part, which is what you see, but then there's also a disconnected or a connected part behind it that is not seen. So there's little details like this, and I'm just making it up. I know it's there, and so I feel fine with like drawing it. And there's like a whole system behind it. It's behind glass, but there's this whole framework in which the light part, which is what you see burning, there's a whole system behind it that is creating that light. So almost like a little drop shadow thing. It's kind of an experiment. I may scrap this whole thing afterwards. Probably not, though. I'm sort of, this is a process of getting over myself, getting over my my nature to render everything out so well and just have people, you know, exalt me for beautiful, highly produced illustration. So there are my lines. It's a little bit frenetic, but there it is. I will say, reference is important. You should know, if you don't know what a motorcycle looks like and you have to draw one, well, you should definitely look some up. You don't have to buy a book of them. Google Images works fine, but it is helpful to have a working knowledge of motorcycles, not necessarily a mechanical knowledge of motorcycles, but what is the simple form a motorcycle can take. And I know it has two wheels, one in the front here, one in the back, has a stoplight, like a brake light here, and it has a seat, has some handlebars, and these kind of loopy exhaust type things, whatever. It's shorthand for motorcycle, and I've given just enough detail to know that it is a motorcycle. So that's about all I want to afford to this. Okay. And I've noticed if you do parallel lines on things like motorcycles or mechanical stuff, it helps. It's a shorthand for like, this is, sorry, that's my dog. Shorthand for this is mechanical. This is a man-made thing. It's not a natural thing. So a lot of times I'll just do, oh, I've drawn a circle. Now I'm going to draw another circle around that circle. And all these little spindles. I mean, what the heck? This isn't real. I'm not, I don't know how these work. I don't know. But they're important. They're important to the wheel. They're important to the illusion of storytelling. So there's my other circle. Oh, there's another one. And it's, I guess parallel might be the wrong word, but you get the idea. Concentric circles, parallel lines, whatever. Just little shorthands for saying, you know, this is a man-made thing. Because the character is a tiger, I wanted to put a little bit of fantasy into this motorcycle to have a kind of a cat eye brake light. I love little personifications of stuff like that. So do little wires here. You know, wires are good. You need wires for electric lights. You need little rivets, you know, little screws. You need sleeves that go around pipes. You need pipes to ventilate the gas. Okay. And I'm not coming to this tiger's face thinking about it differently than all the other lines, all the other things. I want him to exist in the same sort of style and the same sort of visual voice that I've given everything else. And so I'm coming to him without pausing. I'm not taking a step back and thinking about it like I would usually do. I'm just going for it. And I do have a safety net. I mean, I'm drawing on top of lines that I've done already, and a lot of the thought goes into it at that planning stage. So it's kind of carefree, but I still have a little bit of a safety net. I still kind of know where I'm going. not allowing myself to dwell on the fact that, oh, I've messed up a line there, or whatever. Sorry if I'm just repeating myself. I do that. So he's wearing this jacket. And again, you know, these are jackets we've seen. It's kind of a mix between a leather jacket and a jean jacket. 80s vibe, because 80s are all the rage now. It's got pockets. It's got, just like the motorcycle, I mean, these little visual tells for this is this, and not overly rendered, lifeless drawings. Just click my pencil. That's something new. Like, I don't have to go sharpen this. I don't have to, you know, take, you know, 10 seconds, as ridiculous as that sounds, and I realize that. I don't have to take 10 seconds from my pencil being down to go to my sharpener and sharpen the pencil. And then evaluate, is that a good, is that the point that I want? It's the point that I have, and I'm going to go with it. Here's the kind of personal experience of this biker, you know, wearing sort of K-Swiss or like Adidas, like Yeezy shoes, and then his tall kind of white socks, tiger fur. You know, do you look at the latest fashions? Do you look at shoes? Are you taking notice of these things? And if you're a visual artist, you probably are, subconsciously or consciously. And it's cool to kind of see how these come out when you're just kind of doodling. Handlebars. I wanted to kind of put gorilla bars on this thing. But I thought this is more of a little bit more of a super bike type vibe. I thought it might be interesting to put a huge wheel on the back and like a dirt bike wheel on the front. Concentric circles, little spindles. And I don't know how a motorcycle runs. I don't know how to drive a motorcycle, but I know these visual cues to render one, at least convincingly, as in I've convinced people, I've convinced myself at least, that this is a motorcycle. Not an instruction manual for rebuilding one. Kickstand. I think I'm going to render like a lot of the shading. The shading, super technical. But the darks, I think I'm going to do a lot of that with the pencil as well, because I'm here, I'm doing this, it's fast, it's kind of the expedient thing to do. And I'm simplifying the process to creating one layer Whereas before I might go in and do my blacks, my spot blacks, my darkest darks, as a layer in Photoshop. I'm just going to do it here. And I'm not drawing in ink because I've tried ink for comics for different stuff, and that's a whole other ball of wax. Like for me, it just was a different headspace. It was not fast. I had to really like think about everything. I had to think about the forms, how to light them, where to put my darkest darks. It was not conducive for speed and energy in my lines. And I quit, and I felt bad about that for a little while. Like, oh, I just spent $50 on all this ink stuff, all these pens, all the coolest things from the pen store. But what am I after? What am I serving here? Am I serving the story, or am I serving my sort of own artistic ego in how well I can render, or how well I can adapt to a new skill or a new medium? And the answer for me was, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what medium I make comics in. What should matter is my storytelling, my visual language, my readability. And I'm talking like I know stuff. And I've been proven wrong so many times that I do not pretend to have the answers. But this is my mental kind of flow state, and I'm just going through it, and I really like, thank you for sticking with me, and not calling me out as like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's like, what is he? He's not even like he doesn't even have like a comic out. He doesn't have like a, like credits to his name. Know what he's talking about. Okay, so I did this weird thing. So what I do want to be careful with working in pencil is to not smudge. So I'm going to cover... Oh my goodness. My dog sleeps underneath my feet sometimes. And when she freaks out, I freak out. So I'm going to cover the right side of my paper with this printer paper, and to not move it. I don't want to smudge this line while I draw over here on this left side of the image. I was born in the West, in California, but I have not lived there since I was 6. But I have a lot of memories of driving through like desert in Arizona and other places like that. And there's just something super cool about these kind of naked mountains and hills that are free from kind of all this deciduous, piney tree infested, tree covered mountains that you get in higher elevation or in less arid environments, like the east. Sorry, they're more, whatever. I'm going to stop talking about forests because I don't know what to talk about. Okay, but there's like a stark nature to this, to these arid, like, wildernesses and deserts. Mobius drew a lot of desert. Christophe Blain does deserts. There's something about deserts, I think, that just really appeal to me and have a tradition in comics and in storytelling. It's, you know, the desert is a place for a character to go, a harsh environment for him to exist, he or she to exist, and find themselves, find something. It's a place of solitude that they need to go and find, discover, meditate. Thinking about the Bible, and that's maybe something odd to bring up, but Paul, I think before he started his kind of his missionary ministry to all the cities in the Gentile cities, I believe he saw the vision of Christ on the road, and he was converted at that time. But before he began in earnest to kind of preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, he went to the desert, to the wilderness, to you know, maybe convene with God, maybe think about what he's doing, about what has happened. So, man, we are in a flow state right now where I'm talking about the Bible and Paul and his ministry, but I don't care. It's a big, important thing to me, so I was going to talk about it, and I feel like I've talked about everything else. So, deserts are interesting places. And I do have to stop. I do have to stop sometime. That's kind of the final line art right there. I will possibly do a bit more tinkering with it, but I don't want to over-render it. I'll probably detach it from the underdrawing because it served its purpose. I have drawn what I needed to draw from that, and I'm probably going to shut the camera off and think about rendering my blacks, because I don't do that very frequently, and it's not something like drawing where I can just throw down and don't have to think about it. So here comes the aspect of thinking. So I'll shut you off and probably come in coloring it on the computer. So thanks a lot, and see you soon. All right, here we are back in the digital realm. I've scanned my drawing in. I rendered a little bit more. I guess, I'm not sure if that's the right term. Whatever, shading, spotting my blacks in this case. And before I did like all of the whole image, you know, with this sort of sketchy type shading, I pulled back. You know, I'm interested in the focal point, which is the character in this sort of in-between place between like the foreground here of this seedy type smoke store and the majestic desert behind him. He's kind of in this in-between place, this darker area. So I rendered that a little bit more with the pencil. And I scanned it in. I'm in Photoshop. I haven't done anything with the file. But I'm going to show you what I do. So I'm going to do levels, which you can find in your image, or it's Command L. So find image, adjustments, levels, and you can bring your darks to a very dark, very ink-like black, which is helpful because I'm doing this in pencil. And you can bring the white of the paper or the cream or kind of whatever texture you have on your actual paper, you can make it white with the levels by bumping up the contrast. It's kind of important not to lose certain things when you do this, because you could go all the way to the you do too much, and that's like, oh, you don't want to do that, but you want to get to the right place. So I'll do that. Zoom in, make sure I kind of got I like where the blacks are at, where the contrast is at. I didn't lose every little speck and stuff, but that's fine. All right, now that's still my original image. It's pencil on paper. I want to separate the lines from the paper, so to have it in layers. And this you see up here at the right, it's all in one layer. To do that, I want to go into the channels over here on the right, and I want to click on this select all channels, and the channels are the I believe all of the non-white things, so all of the lines in this case. So I'm going to select the channels, all the color channels, and it selects everything that's not white, all the little pixels that are not white. So I've selected that. I'm going to choose a selection tool. It can be the wand, it can be the lasso, whatever, up here. And then right click, select inverse. Now that is selecting whatever. You just do that. And then make a new layer. Go to your bucket for paint, Command G, and get the black paint and drop it in. All right, you've got all the lines on one layer, and I'm going to make paper, just a white background. That's its own layer, and then the lines on top. So pretty cool. I can't remember where I first saw that done. I think it was probably Corey Godby, because he does a lot of pencil and digital color, and that's just like blew my mind. So that's how you do it. So this is good to go. I'm gonna go create underlayers of color and paint underneath the lines, because I'm operating in a very comic-esque way, a graphic way. So I'm thinking about these in kind of almost like 4-color printing, where you're coloring in layers of ink. So the top layer is always going to be the darkest layer. I'm just going to select a color. I'm going to speed this up, make it a little faster, but I'm going to do this in a really fast graphic style. I'm going to do very similar to the, where did that other one go? So here's my sketch, Photoshop sketch. And it's real flat color. I really like this. I think this is good to go. It's workable. I like all the tones. And again, how it's not so precious with getting everything in the lines. Like, I like how this doesn't worry about that too much. So I'm going to bring that over a little bit more polish, probably on this one. But it's the same mindset. So here we go. Alright, this is going to go a lot faster. I've speeded it up a lot. There's not a whole lot going on. I'm only going to talk briefly. The rest is kind of real fast, speedy painting. It took me maybe an hour or so to like paint all of this, which I don't know if that's fast for one panel, but I think this is kind of new for me, so I'm okay with it. The end result is something that I do like. I'll probably have to fine-tune it a bit, but yeah, all in all, a real fun experiment. I think this is definitely the way to go as far as speed and just getting an image done, and as well as enjoying the process for me, and the speed at which I can execute, and also, yeah, just paint it too. Right now, I'm kind of as I'm painting this, I'm working from bigger to smaller. So just like most things with art, you should probably think about the bigger picture as far as the tonal planes. So behind my character is a night scene. It's a plane under the moonlight, and it is the lighter part of the image. So the character is backlit. He is in actually the deepest shadow in this image. So even the foreground with the open sign there is lighter than him. But so right, I guess currently as the video is going and as I'm painting this, there's three tonal planes. So there's the foreground, which is the open sign, the left-hand side of the building, and that is kind of the middle tone. The background, the mountain and the sky, is the lightest tone, and then the darkest tone is the character and the wall that he's resting up against with his motorcycle. And from there, I will start taking bits of tone from each plane, or at least the mid-plane, mid-tonal plane, and putting them onto the sorry, the darkest to the whatever. You know, I'm playing now with the two combined planes of mid-tone and darkest tone, and there's some back and forth there, but with the background, the mountain and the sky, that's on a whole nother level, because I want to show that there's depth there, and it's going to be very simplified. I'm only going to use like 3 tones, I believe I do, in the process of painting the background, because I don't want to render that as well, as I did with my pencils and lines and drawing. I want to emulate in the painting stage. So there's rendering in pencil, then there's over rendering in color, and at no stage of the game do I want to over render or over emphasize things that aren't necessarily important. So the background is a backdrop. It's not center stage. It's not the character. It's not as important as the character. So, man, there's a lot of crazy colors there. Okay. So, as with the lines and the shading, the darker pencil lines that you see in the surrounding the character, there's a lot more detail at the focal point. So he's the most important player in this image. So there's a lot more happening with him and around him in the drawing. Same goes for the painting. There will be a lot more nuance to his coloring than the wall or the mountain behind him. So that's about all. Again, thanks for watching. I'm just gonna let this play, and you can fill in the audio parts with your own music or audiobooks or whatever. I'm listening to Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's a really interesting audiobook about just focusing in kind of an age that, the Twitter, social media age that we live in. It's great in certain aspects, but then it's also possibly a robber of focus and really getting deep into your subject matter. Surface level. It's kind of combating shallow or surface level work in a way, and it's really interesting ideas. So definitely worth a try to either read it or listen to it. But yeah, so I'm gonna cut the audio and we're gonna go silent. But hopefully you have something else to listen to, and I'll probably come back in at the final and talk about the wrap up a little bit. All right, bye. Okay, so about 3 minutes till the closing of this video, and I've pulled back the colors a lot. I started out pretty saturated, a lot of purples and pinks and kind of 80s retro colors, but right now, as I'm finishing up, I want to tie everything together, all the colors, and really give it a print quality, and that's kind of an ambiguous word, but or phrase, but I want it to be legible, so I'm not gonna go too dark. I'll probably lighten things up and remove a little bit of the contrast that I had before with those deep saturated colors, and have everything a lot more desaturated and a little lighter. Even after this video, and I wrap this this video, I have actually taken the image, saved it as a JPEG, took it to my phone, and put it in Instagram, where I post things, and played with some of their filters, and sometimes I end up really liking how their filters look over my image. Pretty rarely do I go back and change it, but this time I did, because it brought a lot more lighter. Anyway, it just looked nicer, I guess, is what I'm saying. So I actually went back to the image and really lightened it up significantly, but it still retains all the colors, and I think it still has the same mood. So thanks again, and we'll do this again.